This is Caracas. President Nicolás Maduro met his cabinet at the Miraflores Palace and addressed what he described as growing external aggression by the United States. He warned that recent U.S. naval activity in the Caribbean risks triggering a wider conflict and said his government is preparing decrees to respond to any scenario. He did not detail what a formal declaration would entail. Play the following clip in full now. This false narrative seeks to impose a state of violence in the Caribbean and in South America, and it threatens to escalate into a catastrophic war in the Caribbean and South America. An aggression against Venezuela would be the beginning of a catastrophic war in the Caribbean and South America. Nicolás Maduro, president of Venezuela. The immediate backdrop to Maduro's remarks is a U.S. maritime operation Washington describes as counter-narcotics work. A video posted by U.S. President Donald Trump's account purports to show a kinetic strike on a vessel alleged to be linked to drug trafficking. Caracas rejects those claims and says fishermen were targeted. Venezuelan authorities report several vessels destroyed and at least 14 people killed in recent operations the U.S. characterizes as anti-narcotics actions. Caracas calls some of those deaths summary executions. Hundreds of civilians and armed militia members marched in support of Maduro, waving flags and carrying rifles. State television broadcast scenes of the march, with government media emphasizing national unity in the face of what it calls foreign aggression. The Defense Minister, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, described the U.S. post as contemptuous and said the women shown were decorated by the state. We will play a short clip from the march. And look, Trump, you picked a fight with Venezuelan women. Now you will see what is going to happen to you. Come here, step on Venezuelan soil, and you will see that we women are warriors. Flor Infante, broadcaster. A possible declaration of a state of external commotion is an exceptional measure under the Venezuelan constitution. It can be enacted when the security of the nation is deemed seriously at risk and can be extended up to 90 days. That measure grants the executive expanded powers and raises questions about civil liberties and political oversight. Legal scholars and opposition figures warn such powers can be used to curb dissent. Supporters argue they are necessary in moments of perceived external threat. The U.S. frames its Caribbean deployments as part of an effort to intercept illicit shipments and combat transnational narcotics trafficking. U.S. officials point to allegations of ties between senior Venezuelan figures and criminal networks. Washington says its presence aims to stop shipments headed to international markets. Venezuela rejects those allegations as politically motivated and calls the operations unlawful. Independent verification of specific maritime incidents is difficult. Local crews, fishermen associations, and human rights groups have at times disputed official interdiction accounts, citing civilian casualties and lack of due process. When incidents result in deaths, calls for transparent investigations grow louder from NGOs, victims' families, and some governments. Transparency about evidence and clear chains of custody are central to accountability. If Caracas declares a state of external commotion, practical effects could include increased executive control over public security, restrictions on movement and assembly, and faster deployment of state resources. For journalists and civil society groups, such steps can complicate reporting and limit access. Opposition leaders say the crisis is a pretext to rally support and distract from deep economic and governance problems at home. International observers warn that escalatory rhetoric and military deployments near sensitive waters risk miscalculation. Regional governments fear military confrontation. Some leaders call for de-escalation. Others remain silent, mindful of diplomatic ties and economic interests. Diplomacy is the most viable path to avoid incidents at sea becoming broader conflicts. Analysts recommend neutral fact-finding mechanisms and regional mediation to clarify contested incidents and lower tensions. Whether parties will accept outside monitors is uncertain. Human cost is central. Families of those killed in maritime actions demand answers. For coastal communities, the line between fisherman and suspect can be tragically thin. Reporting on these events requires careful on-the-ground verification and reliable sourcing. Humanitarian organizations stress preparedness and civilian protection in case the situation deteriorates. There are broader geopolitical stakes. Venezuela's role in regional trade and energy markets means any escalation could affect oil supply, regional commerce, and migration flows, deepening instability in vulnerable countries. Investors and international institutions watch developments closely. Domestic politics in the United States will shape Washington's options. Counter-narcotics operations often receive bipartisan support, but actions near another country's economic zone carry diplomatic costs. US officials must balance domestic pressure with legal and reputational risks. International legal norms require that interdictions respect human rights and due process. Even when operations target criminal networks, collateral harm and civilian deaths provoke political crises. Legal experts stress the need for parliamentary oversight and judicial review when emergency powers are used. Civil society presses for safeguards to remain in place. Media coverage is contested. State-controlled outlets amplify government narratives. Independent outlets face restrictions and resource limits. International outlets provide context but often lack local access. The result is competing versions of events. Viewers should note the source of each claim and demand evidence when serious allegations are made. De-escalation tools exist, hotlines, deconfliction protocols, and regional diplomacy. Analysts warn that misidentifications, accidental engagements, or provocative rhetoric can spark unintended clashes. Without communication channels, small incidents risk rapid amplification. Regional bodies such as the Organization of American States and the Caribbean Community could convene talks. Track 2 diplomacy may help if political will exists on both sides. Returning to the material evidence, the video posted on Truth Social claims to show a kinetic strike with casualties. Independent investigators and international monitors should examine raw footage, vessel logs, and eyewitness accounts to establish a credible public record. Without transparency, competing narratives harden and the risk of escalation grows. For ordinary Venezuelans, immediate concerns remain safety and livelihoods. Economic hardship, shortages, and migration have already reshaped daily life. Any wider conflict would intensify pressures and likely produce new waves of displacement and suffering. Humanitarian and aid organizations emphasize protecting civilians and preparing contingency plans. Key takeaways for viewers: incidents at sea involving lethal force demand independent scrutiny. Emergency legal measures have real consequences for civil and political life, and regional diplomacy can and should be used to reduce tensions before they spiral. Those are the stakes in Caracas today. President Maduro has warned of catastrophic consequences and signaled readiness to use extraordinary powers. Washington frames its actions as anti-narcotics operations. Between those competing narratives, ordinary people risk becoming the casualties of a larger geopolitical contest. We will continue to follow official statements, independent reporting, and any formal decrees from Caracas.